Hi, welcome to Healing Humanity. My name is Dina. I want to talk to you today about letting go. So, one of the questions that people have asked me is like, how do you walk away and close doors to the people that are not for you? And how do you know that they're not for you, right? Well, I can tell you that that was never an easy one for me. You know, I'm Sicilian, I have loyalty in my core. It's just part of who we are. It's part of all Sicilians. It's just inbred in us, right? A severe sense of loyalty to the people that we care about, to the people that come into our lives. And it doesn't matter if you're there for a day or if you're there for 20 years, even longer. There's a sense of loyalty that we carry that just lingers. And sometimes we have to learn to really let go of that. We have to learn that some things are not for us. And that's one of the hardest lessons I think that I've had to learn is that I have to let go of the people that are not for me, that are not for my life. You know, there's a lot of things that we value in life, but the worst thing that we can do is to hold on to things that are not good for us. And like I said, I held on to certain people and situations that were not good for me for a very long time in my life. And I did so because I didn't want to lose what I thought was a valuable connection. And when I look back, and I'm not going to say anything bad about these people that were in my life, but I will say that they did not they did not bring value to my life. Um, you know, in some instances, perhaps in small instances they did, but overall, when you looked at the big picture, there was no value brought to my life. And I was holding on to these relationships with probably hope or the thought that whatever was brought in the beginning would be there, you know, towards the end. And often with a hope that things would turn around. And I have a hornet. Hold on. Okay. Holy crap. I looked down at one of the books that I have in front of me and there was a big, huge hornet that was on the book. Okay. He's gone. Here we go. I don't know where I was, but basically, you know, when we look at our lives and we look at the people that are in our lives, if they're not offering value to you, it's important to let them go. And I don't mean that people have to do things for you or give to you on a constant basis, but there has to be some mutual benefit for the relationship to really work out. And I don't mean just a love relationship. I mean even friendships and sometimes even family members, which can be sad. But like holding on to those things that are not beneficial, that are damaging to your emotional well-being, to your psyche in general, um, it just it's just going to be something that brings you down. And we're not here to live in a state of depression or lack or desire. We're here to enjoy our lives. We're here to find that joy within ourselves, within our own hearts, and not be, like belabor these relationships and keep them around when they're just not working. Um, you know, it's hard. It's hard to love somebody and still know that you have to let them go. And I've had to do that a lot, um, you know, but I think it's also important to know that when you find things out that are being done, maybe behind your back, or you know, if they're not being respectful or they're celebrating your failures, even um, maybe somebody who's slandering you or who lack manners, people that are just completely inconsiderate, even um, toxic. These are the folks that you have to say to yourself, is this worth my unsettled feelings? Is this worth me continuing in this unsettled manner in my life? And eventually, hopefully, you'll get through the illusion that things are going to get better, or that, you know, this person is valuable to my life, or that this person loves me, um, or that I love this person. Because it's better to love somebody from afar than to love somebody who's toxic, in your same house. It's better to let them all go. And like I said, it's not easy, but once you start opening your eyes to the reality of what's going on around you, it starts to bring up more and more um, of that reality, right? You start to view things in a different light. And when I first started, I was called selfish. I was called um, hoity-toity. I was called desiring, that I wanted too much. Um, and when I look back on those things, like in that moment, that was hard. It was hard to hear. It was hard to go through. It was hard to take a look within myself to see whether or not those things were true. And if they were true, what did I need to do to change them? In many instances, the negativity and the finger pointing and the lack of consideration and the lack of growth in other people was not my problem. I had to realize that I was standing in a sense of value for myself, and other people could not see that. And that's not for me to fix in other people, and that's not for you to fix in other people either. If somebody's not valuing your growth and your desire to do something different in your life, or be something different, or have like a greater sense of accomplishments, you need to find new people. Honestly, there's just no other way to put it. And it doesn't mean that you can't talk to these people, and it doesn't mean that they can't be in your life. They can, in increments, smaller increments, over time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's hard to walk through this life alone, and I'm not recommending that, but I am stating to you that it's very important that when you start to awaken and you start to see yourself in a better light, which we're all supposed to do, there will be people that will try to hold you back, because you're showing yourself in a different way that they're not used to, and you are showing up in the world with desires that they weren't aware of when they first met you. And so that they take offense to that. Many people will take offense to that. And so it's important to know that when that door closes, or when you're able to close that door, and it may take time, it's important not to open it back up again. The people that lack consideration, lack respect, lack manner, just general manners, they will pull you down completely. They will destroy your sense of autonomy, like to be able to walk in the world with your head held high, if you give them the chance. Why would they do that? Because a lot of people don't have that desire for growth. A lot of people are willing and able to just walk a certain path and continue down that path. It's like people who have had jobs for 25 years, 30 years. There's nothing wrong with that. That's great for some people, but for others, that is a weight around their neck. And those kinds of people cannot stay in those kinds of positions for that long of a time. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's all up to the person. It's all up to who you are, and what you're living in your life, and what you want for your life. There's nothing wrong with growth. There's nothing wrong with wanting growth in your life, whether it's small or large. And I think it's easy when you start to put yourself as the number one importance in your life. I think it's easy to let those people kind of live their own lives, and I'm not saying push them out. I'm not saying cause a big fight or anything like that, but I am saying that over time you put distance between you, because the mentality that some folks have will just bring you down, and you can't grow and and be held down. It's like it's like those little plants you see, and they're pushing through and they're trying really hard to break through the asphalt, but they can't get through the asphalt until they find a crack, until they find that little glimpse of hope, and they can flourish through that crack, through that break. And that's what you need from people that are trying to bring you down. They're that asphalt that's sitting on top of you, that that will not allow you to grow, that will not allow you um, to build something more for yourself, either within yourself or around you. Um, you have to find new people. You have to find. And what's interesting is that, in all my travels around the United States, it's been fun to realize the differences between groups of people. There are folks that think it's a really bad idea to skydive, right? So I had a group of friends that thought that that was the worst thing in the world. You should not be doing this. That it was terrifying, and their biggest fear was falling to death. And I know that they cared about me and they didn't want to see anything happen to me. I get that. But what I found interesting is that the friends that I was with at that time encouraged it and said, "Absolutely, way to go! Be brave. You got this. You can do this. There's nothing to it," and did not try to instill the fear um, that they may have had in me at the time, because of course skydiving is somewhat filled with a little bit of fear and a little bit of like, you have anticipation, but you also have hesitation, right? You don't want to fall to your death, and so you personally have to work through that. And when you have others that are building that hesitation in you and wanting to hold you down, and it's not that it's not that they're purposefully trying to hold you down. It's just that's their fear, that's their beliefs, and by sharing their beliefs, they're just they're imposing those thoughts and those emotions on you, and you have to work through that while you're working through your own. So it's better to really, find the people in your life that are doing the things that you want to do. I don't want to do skydiving anymore. That was one time was enough for me, but I'm glad I did it. I remember when I finally hit the ground and my feet were on level ground. The guy said to me, what'd you think?" I said, "Oh, that was fantastic. That was amazing." He said, "Okay, are you going to schedule again?" And I was like, "Absolutely not." I was like, "No way, not in this world ever again." But thanks for the experience. I'll see you later. It was not something. Wasn't for me. But I'm glad. Like I said, I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad that I listened to the people that were lifting me up, rather than the ones that were not bringing me down, but were like that wet blanket. You carry around that wet blanket. It's heavy. It's not a fun time, and that's kind of what it felt like a bunch of wet blankets sitting on top of my head. And so that's why it's easy to let go. And plus, for me, this might sound terrible, but I've always been in a position where I was a supervisor in my jobs. And so I really couldn't build kind of real close knit relationships, because I was always the one that ultimately would have to make the ultimate call. Do they stay? Do they go? What is the job duties? What is happening? Who's getting paid what? And that, all those things, right? As a supervisor of sorts. And so I wasn't able to make those close kinds of friendships that that some people make in the workplace, things like that. And so I guess it was easier for me. I have friends from my childhood, and I have friends from my mid-adult times that I made outside of work. But work friendships, those were few and far between. And there were some, but they weren't close friendships, right? And so I learned how to hold back, professionally and respectfully, hold back my love for somebody, or my care for someone, because there was always somebody that had a problem, or had a crisis, or needed this or needed that, or and you had to hold strong. As a supervisor, you can't just let your emotions run away with you and go, oh, you have baby troubles today, which I've had 1,000 times. You have baby troubles today, I understand. Okay, stay home. You have didn't wake up on time. Okay, I get it. But no, sometimes you have to be harsh. Sometimes you have to be hard. And sometimes, although you have to be respectful and considerate, you cannot let situations, or other people's situations, allow you to get off track. I had a business to run. I couldn't let people's emotions, people's chaos, I couldn't let that control what was going on in my environment. And so I think that's how I got really good at letting people go that weren't the best for my life, because I learned through the work environment that I learned about people for sure, but I also learned about myself and how to control those emotions and control the amount of care that I have for certain people, or not have for certain people. And I guess that's what made it easier for me. And I would just say that it's a matter of, it's not that I always cared about my people, but it was a reserved care. It was a controlled care. I didn't let those emotions run away, from my heart. Like, I could care. Like, there was a time I was a dispatcher for a bunch of drivers, and boy, I'll tell you, those guys put me through the ringer sometimes. But I had 18 or 19 people that, mostly men, one woman who, I was sending all over the place, and was the supervisor of that department, and or at least of them. And they were more chaos and more drama than I could ever explain. But in that position, probably alone, I learned the most on how to control my emotions, because I cared about them. I cared about where they went. I cared about their safety, of course, and that was my job, to care about their safety. My job was to make sure that they were safe, make sure that they were doing the things that they were supposed to be doing, make sure that they got up on time, make sure that they got to the jobs and did the work that they were supposed to do and got home safely. And so, because they worked all hours of the day, and sometimes they worked way more hours than probably they should have, and at least before the laws changed. And so during that time, it was very easy, or would have been very easy, for me to just let my emotions go, and let them just sort of run rampant, and let the chaos kind of take hold of this whole environment. But I couldn't. I think that's where I learned probably the most about who I was becoming and who I needed to become in order to be successful going forward. And so I think that's where I learned the most. It was in that position, and I think that's where I learned to shut doors on things that the door needed to shut, and not feel bad for it, not turn around and feel like I needed to keep the drama going. I just needed to shut the door. And a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people don't like to say no. A lot of people don't like to let go of people that have been in their life for a long time, or let people go that they do care about. Sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes it's damn necessary. And so I would just say that if you're feeling like, you're dealing with slander, you're dealing with violence, God forbid, you're dealing with lack of manners, or lack of courtesies, lack of consideration, I would just say, really consider what you want for your life and who you are becoming at that moment. Not who you are right now, but who you are becoming. and where this path that you're on right now, where is this leading you to? Because if it's not leading you where you want to go, you've got to end it. You've got to move on, or you're going to be stuck there for the rest of your life, potentially, until you actually wake up and realize that it's important for you to do what's best for you. And that's not always the easiest path, but it is always the necessary one. So until next time, keep healing, keep living with intention, and keep growing.